Hello, this is Leo Bray on behalf of Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center in Palm Springs. Visit us online at urbanyoga.org or on Facebook at Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center to check out our schedule. There are classes online on Zoom every day. You can practice with us live, long distance. You can practice with us several days a week if you're in Palm Springs at Ruth Hardy Park. So check out the schedule for those dates and times and teachers, several different teachers. I think each park class is a different teacher. And also online, you will find the tip jar. You can make contributions to support us via Zelle or Venmo or PayPal. And there are options there to make those contributions recurring. So if you're attending regularly and you can contribute regularly. Today, I'm making a shorter video here. We're going to focus on plank pose. Talk about what plank pose looks like, the standard pose, some variations that can make it more accessible, accommodate issues you might have going on, as well as some variations that can make it more challenging if you're feeling like that. And those will include getting into side plank. And of course, even within side plank, we have variations that can make it less challenging or more challenging. So we'll start with basic standard plank pose. If you're not familiar with plank, maybe you've heard of a push-up. A plank is the top end of a push-up. So we're supported by our hands and feet, and it's called plank for its long, straight shape. Now, of course, the body's not made of wood. It's not going to be that straight, but what you want is to have your hips in line with your shoulders and your knees. You want your hands shoulder width apart so that your joints are stacked, having your shoulders above your elbows, above your wrists. That makes for a nice stable line. So you can feel into that. If there's a mirror in your room or if you use a camera, then you can look and see, and you want your whole spine aligned. So I've been talking, I had my head down, my head like this. This is more of a plank shape. You don't want the head hanging down like that, or the neck cranked back like this. The neck is just the top of the spine, nice continuous line. Now, the first thing we might do to make it more accessible, because maybe this just feels like too much work, maybe this bothers your lower back, you can make a shorter plank by just letting the knees down and see my hips are still in line with my shoulders and knees. My neck is still relaxed. And my feet are still engaged here. This is important to note when it comes to the lower plank. My toes are still curled under. If we go like this, then that's not a plank anymore. That's sort of like a cobra. Heart opener. This is more a cobra. And cobras, of course, can be at any height, but they're heart openers. So when the feet are disengaged like that, you're out of the plank and heading towards cobra. A plank, even with knees down, has feet engaged. This helps support your lower back, actually, that engagement in the feet. So we don't want this pelvis dipping down like that. We want the hips up like that. Core engagement. So there's always the option now. Maybe a class you're taking, the teacher doesn't say lower your knees in plank. If you want to, feel free to lower your knees, whether you've been directly invited to or not. Listen to your body. If you know a shorter plank is better for you, take a shorter plank. Now, some other variations that we might try out, we can use our blocks here for plank. Have blocks under your hands. Still want to have your hands shoulder width apart. You come into the shape like that. And you might be thinking, well, what difference is that? You're doing the same thing with your hands and feet. Your hips are in the same position. This can make a difference when you transition from plank. So a common transition we do is Chaturanga Dandasana, four-pointed staff pose. We come down like this, and then we come forward to cobra or upward facing dog, heart opener. So with the blocks under your hands, you might find that transition to be easier on your shoulders, give you more room between your body and the floor. And of course, you can also do that with your knees lowered. You can come down and make your way into your heart opener, because we often use plank in sun salutations. Now, some other options that we might do, maybe being in plank bothers your wrists. It can be a lot of force on your wrist. When your hand's on the floor, your wrist is about at a right angle. And that might feel like too much on your wrists. So one thing you could do is be on your forearms. So my forearms are parallel to the mat here. My hands are just at rest with the pinky edge on the ground. And my wrists aren't doing anything. So if you have trouble with your wrists, this is one option you can do. Forearm planks, sometimes I call it dolphin plank. You might have your hands together like that. Now, maybe that feels more challenging in some sense. While it gives a break to the wrists, we'll explore some different arm shapes and variations now that can actually make plank more challenging, or mix in some more challenging variations of your plank. So you wouldn't necessarily do these plank variations as something you'd incorporate into your sun salutation, but something you might play around with on its own. So there's Sphinx. Well, Sphinx is really like this, with hands flat, forearms parallel to the mat. But Sphinx is more of a heart opener than a variation of plank. But you could play with plank like that with the palms down and the forearms supporting you. Still not really doing much with the wrists. And maybe that position in the arms feels better to you than the other one where the hands are turned like this with the palms facing each other. Now, ways you might play around with varying the plank and make things more challenging is you can go from plank into different arm shapes as part of a sequence, and I'll show you how some of that might look. So you come from a plank, you can come down to one elbow and down to the other elbow, then back to the left hand, back to the right hand. So this is sometimes called walking plank. Forearm down, hand planted. In other variations, you might arms parallel to the left, perpendicular to the mat. Come down, forearm, hand, play like that. You could come down on one forearm and then the other, and then walk them in front of the other and back. Make your way back up to one hand, then to the other hand. So that's a lot of work, but if you feel really into your planks, you feel strong in your planks, and you're looking to increase the challenge level, you can go through those walking plank variations. This is a common one. You see this outside of yoga in a lot of like HIIT classes, high intensity interval training. You might even see this sometimes in like a CrossFit sequence where you go from being on your hands to one forearm, both forearms, one hand, both hands. And as you get into it more, you might do it faster. It makes it hard to talk. You usually don't narrate this sequence while you're doing that more vigorous stuff. Other ways you might make your plank more challenging as you are in a sun salutation, or maybe not in a sun salutation. We played with the arms and the hands. You can play with the feet. So your plank has both feet on the ground, but you can go plank with one leg raised in the air. You could even rest. So I have my Achilles tendon between my big toe and the next toe. You could make that part of the flow. You could go into your heart opener like that. And you can pull back and up from there to the downward dog with just one foot on the floor. And I can be resting on the other foot or foot up in the air. Another variation where we really mix it up, we can play with side plank, we call this. So we come into front plank and bring one hand below the face. So you have your hands under your shoulders. Now one is under your face instead. Then you're going to tip onto the outer edge of that foot like this. So options here. This hand can stay on the hip. Top foot can just rest on top of the bottom foot or in front of the foot. Other options, you could let this bottom knee down. That's a lot more accessible to let that weight support you. Also, this leg can lift up, and that can be with the knee on the ground, or with this leg engaged, you can lift the top leg, like opening scissors. You could lift this arm like that and stack your hands. Sometimes we fall. You could also do tree pose with the legs. Kind of sweaty when you try to get your foot to stay on your leg and you're all sweaty. It's tricky. And you want to come out as slowly as you can. When you make that twisting motion, you come out of your side plank. After a refreshing sip of water, I'll turn myself around, do the other side. Because we want to do everything twice, we want to stay balanced in both sides of the body. So I bring my left hand under my face now. And take your time. I tip onto outer edge of my left foot. My right foot comes on top of my left. I lift. So my shoulders are stacked, my hips are stacked. So I could play with this. I could play with this, the tree legs. I could let the bottom knee down. I could reach the top hand up and stack hands. I could have this foot in front. And you can put it from your side. This can be a real nice movement here, a nice twisting exhale and down and reach under your arm. And now come back up. It feels really good in the back. If you've got it, if you've got the strength in your arms to stay in this long enough to do that, it feels really neat. And we tip slowly. You sort of land in plank as you tip like that. Now, other things you might do to vary your plank. I showed you a few. We talked about coming to your forearms if it bothers your wrists to be in plank. Other things you might do. So there's different, sometimes when we have trouble with our wrists, we think we're lacking strength when we're really lacking flexibility, or we think we're lacking flexibility when we really think we're lacking strength. And it can be hard to gauge which is lacking, and that's okay. You don't have to solve that. You can work on variations. And when you really work on a full body practice and you work consistently, preferably daily, both strength and flexibility will increase along the way. It's just what happens with the practice. I know when I began practicing, my goals were to be more flexible and less stiff and in pain less often. I did not have it as a goal to be stronger, but I became stronger along the way. That's part of what happened. So practice affects different people, different bodies in different ways. For me, I didn't have a goal of losing 30 pounds, but within a couple months of starting daily practice, that also happened for this yogi. That does not happen for everybody. So we get different things. We come into it differently, so of course we progress differently. But anyway, I was going to say some other variation we might try if it's too much on your wrists to have them right under your shoulders like that, because that's a 90-degree flex in the wrist. Now, depending on the strength of your hands and the comfort with doing this on the floor, you might try making a fist and resting your knuckles on the mat. You can do that instead. So I'm just resting my fists on the ground. Now my wrists are engaged, but they're not bent. So I have that, an even stronger joint stacking here with shoulders above, elbows above wrists, because it's linear. It's all, there's no angle there. I've taken out that 90-degree angle in the wrists. Now, maybe that's crazy to you. Maybe that hurts if you try it, so don't do it again. This one works for me. Toddling again, drinking water again, hot, humid, okay, in continental here. To toggle again, you can vary the hand position to make your planks more challenging. You might try coming up onto your fingertips. We say in yoga, tented fingers. So you can come up this so that your palms aren't on the mat, and your fingers are doing all the work. Now that's less bend in the wrist. That's a lot of force in the fingers. It's definitely a more challenging thing you might do. I did not know that I could do that. The way that I learned about that was I was at a fundraising event at a nonprofit where I taught, and one of the donors, we were indoor rock climbing together, and I was chatting with this gentleman and talking about how practice of yoga strengthens your hands and feet, and how that what the practice of yoga does for your body lends nicely to rock climbing. These two activities complement each other very well. I found from the first time that I tried climbing a few years into my yoga practice that it seemed to be a natural with the climbing stuff. And what had happened was this donor asked if I could do push-ups on my fingertips. And I said, I don't know. Let me try. I found out that I could. I know you've done that before, so now I never even thought of doing that before. So, wonderful thing in practice. You'll develop abilities that you weren't expecting to, maybe never even thought of. A lot of times the benefits we get from practice are less obvious. Ancillary things. We'll come into a practice with a reason in mind or a list of reasons in mind, and inevitably we get more from it than what we thought we would. Particularly if you practice daily yoga. There are reasons that we call this a practice. I find that it works best when it's done daily. I can't say that I've never missed a day, because I have, but repetition is very powerful. And variation is very powerful. There's nothing wrong with having a routine and having some things that we do every day, some components, some sequences, some poses, but also to have variety in the practice. This variety brings strength. You can do the exact same practice every day, on and on and on, and you'll get some benefit from it. But by mixing things up, we keep ourselves challenged to the degree that is appropriate for each of us, and we round ourselves out. And also, this brings us to talk about mental flexibility, neuroplasticity, to use the big fancy word. So, working at the edges of the comfort zone to extend the boundaries of that old comfort zone. So the more we can shake things up a bit, challenge ourselves, play with the edge, Play with the edge of what you think you can do. Play with the edge of sensation. Don't push anything to the point that it hurts, but always inviting the body to see if it can do a bit more. It's an inquiry. And when you ask your body, can we go further here? It's okay if the answer is no. But always that spirit of inquiry, that beginner's mind that we talked about, that being open to learning more, being open to doing more. Because in doing more, we inevitably learn more. We can't think our way into new actions, but we can act our way into new modes of thinking. That's all for today for this clip. As I said, I'm Leo Bray on behalf of Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center in Palm Springs. Please visit us online. Stop by the tip jar where you can make a contribution or set up recurring contributions. Keep that support flowing just as we keep our movement and breath flowing. Check out the class schedule, the details on when to join us live on Zoom or live in person in Palm Springs. And of course, you can access our full 1-hour classes or these shorter segments on YouTube at your convenience. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day. The light within me sees and honors the light within each of you. Namaste.